Question number 5, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. I've called Dr. Russell Norman.
My question...
Order. Would Chris Hipkins stand, withdraw and apologise for that remark? Withdraw and apologise. Question number 5, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Conservation and asks, what did he say in his meeting with officials on 29 July that led Department of Conservation Deputy Director-General Doris Johnson to write in an email later that day that he is, and I quote, likely to query whether we leave it all to the EPA to consider, end quote.
Honourable Tony Ryall.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Conservation, nothing. The Minister did express concern that he didn't have enough information about the submission, which was due to be lodged on Friday the 2nd of August, and asked to see a copy of the submission before it was lodged.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So are we to understand that Deputy Director-General Doris Johnson wrote in an email to other senior department...
The member carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So are we to understand that Deputy Director-General Doris Johnson wrote an email to other senior managers within the Department of Conservation saying that Honourable Dr Nick Smith is likely to query whether we leave it all to the EPA to consider? She wrote that email in response to Mr Smith saying nothing.
Honourable Tony Ryall.
On behalf of the Minister of Conservation, yes. As Doris Johnson has said herself, quote, the concern was that he didn't have enough information. We didn't have a long discussion on the ins and outs that might be in it. We just talked about him wanting some more information and he gave no direction, unquote.
Supplementary question.
Order. Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
So when Deputy Director-General Doris Johnson wrote this email to all these other senior managers within the Department of Conservation, saying that Nick Smith was likely to query whether we leave it all to the EPA to consider, that is, that they drop their submission, she just wrote this email, what, for random reasons? No reason at all, just because she felt like writing the email.
Honourable Tony Ryall.
Mr Speaker, you would have to ask, on behalf of the Minister, of course, Mrs Johnston would have to explain her motivations for those emails, other than the fact that I could say that what she has said is, quote, the Minister did not play any role in my decision-making, unquote. And with respect to the matters in that note, she's made it clear, quote, that the concern was that the Minister didn't have enough information. We didn't have a long discussion on the ins and outs that might be in it. We just talked about him wanting some more information and he gave no direction, unquote.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Is it standard practice for senior officials within the Department of Conservation to write emails talking about the Minister of Conservation and saying that the Minister of Conservation is likely to query whether the department should just leave it all up to the EPA and not make a submission? Is it standard practice in the Department of Conservation for senior officials to write such emails in response to the Minister saying nothing?
Honourable Tony
On behalf of the Minister, look, I would not be in a position to be able to answer that question, particularly as a Minister in Nick Smith's stead today. But what I would point to is the comments that Doris Johnston herself has made publicly, where she refers to that line in the email as saying that, quote, the concern was that he didn't have enough information, we didn't have a long discussion on the ins and outs that might be in it, we just talked about him wanting some more information and he gave no direction, unquote. But more importantly, the comment that she made, quote, the Minister did not play any role in my decision-making, unquote.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Did Nick Smith find it difficult to have the conversation with Doris Johnson about the draft submission that the department was about to submit when Mr. Smith says he did not even knew that this submission existed until 6 weeks later, How do you have a conversation about a submission without knowing that the submission exists?
Because,
Honourable Tony Ryall.
on behalf of the Minister, because the note that he got in his weekly report is quite clear that the department is evaluating the proposed plan change and resource consents, and that a submission should be lodged.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question. Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the Minister aware that in the document he's just been reading from, it actually says that it is the department's preliminary view that a submission should be lodged on the plan change? So how is it possible for the Minister to claim he did not know that this draft submission existed when it is both in the briefing note and, as he has just said, it was in the conversation that he had with his officials?
Honourable Tony Ryall.
Mr. Speaker, it's clear on behalf of the Minister got a copy of the final submission on the 31st of July. He's made it publicly clear that he was unaware that there was an earlier draft that he became aware of after a Radio New Zealand report sometime in July, rather in the other month, this month.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is he aware that departmental officials met about a week before the 29th of July or thereabouts and had a significant discussion as to whether they should lodge the submission because they knew that it would be controversial, and they made a decision to continue to go ahead with the submission in spite of the fact that it would be controversial? And the submission was only withdrawn after Nick Smith intervened in the process on the 29th of July.
Honourable Tony Ryall.
Mr. Speaker, I'm disappointed that that member thinks Doris Johnston is a liar. She has been a loyal public servant.
Order.
I made no such claim.
Order. That doesn't help answer the question. Can they... The way forward, I'm going to ask the Dr. Russel Norman to repeat that question. Order.
Is the Minister aware that Senior Department of Conservation officials met about a week before the 29 July meeting with the Minister and decided to proceed with the submission even though they knew it would be controversial? Is he aware of that fact and that the submission was only withdrawn after the meeting with the Minister on the 29th of July?
Honourable Tony Ryall.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister, as the Minister in his stead today, I'm not able to answer specifically whether the member knew of that meeting. But what I do know is that the premise of that member's question says that what Mrs. Johnston has been saying is not true, because that member is saying that Nick Smith influenced the decision-making. Mrs. Johnston says, quote, "The Minister did not play any role in my decision-making," unquote. My understanding as Minister answering this question today is that Doris Johnston has been a thoroughly professional and loyal public servant to both sides of this House, and I'm disappointed her word is being denounced by that member.
Order. Question number 6, the Honourable Shane Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Finance.
Order.
Does he agree with the Productivity Commission that the growing gap in labour productivity has been the main driver of an increasing disparity in GDP per capita between the two trans-Tasman economies? And given double-digit house price inflation in Auckland, doesn't this show the government's efforts to rebalance the economy towards the productive exports and jobs has failed?
Mr. Speaker. Honourable